Jan Patrick Villeneuve dari USI ya, University de Italiano. Jadi sebelum dimulai kita akan minta Pak Heru Nurasa untuk mengantarkan diskusi ini, karena ini kegiatan ini adalah kerjasama antara Pusat Studi Desentralisasi dan Pembangunan Partisipatif, kemudian program Pasca Sarjana Administrasi Publik dan juga program Sarjana Administrasi Publik. Jadi ini kerjasama antara beberapa institusi di bawah Visip Unpad. Patrick, sorry, I have to speak in Bahasa Indonesia for a while to welcome the students, and Pak Heru also will make a welcome speech for the student. Mangga Pak Heru.
Ya, mangga. Terima kasih Bu Ida. Baik, Ibu Bapak, saudara-saudara sekalian, alhamdulillah hari ini kita akan menyelenggarakan seminar internasional dengan tema Open Government Reform, a Challenging Proposition. Ini kerjasama ya antara Pusat Studi Desentralisasi dan Pembangunan Partisipatif dengan program Pasca Sarjana dan program Sarjana juga di sini ya, yang akan ikut dalam proses seminar ini. Khusus untuk program Sarjana ini merupakan bagian dari perkuliahan yang reguler ya. Jadi saudara-saudara nanti akan diarahkan oleh Pak Iman untuk mengisi absen dan juga akan diarahkan untuk membuat review ya dari hasil seminar ini ya, sebagai bagian dari penugasan mata kuliah administrative reform. Jadi saudara mohon supaya ini mengerjakannya dengan sungguh-sungguh, mendengarkan dengan sungguh-sungguh. Saya kira ini kerjasama ini sesuatu yang terus dirintis ya oleh fakultas, dan alhamdulillah Prodi juga memperoleh kesempatan untuk ikut terlibat ya di dalam kegiatan ini. Jadi mudah-mudahan ini merupakan awal ya, bukan awal sih, merupakan langkah-langkah yang terus akan dilakukan ke depan untuk membangun atmosfer akademik di Visip Unpad, terutama di lingkungan administrasi publik. Baik, saya kira terima kasih pada saudara-saudara mahasiswa yang telah hadir ya dalam acara ini, dan saya kira juga saya yakin ini akan sangat bermanfaat gitu ya untuk untuk pengayaan ilmu dan membangun atmosfer akademik di lingkungan kita. Dan kepada Jane Patrick, I think we are very proud to have you here in seminar, international seminar. So welcome to you, Patrick. Dan saya kira sekian Bu Ida. Mungkin terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you very much, Pak Heru. Before we start, I'd like to introduce our guest today. Patrick, allow me to open your data at your university. So this is actually the cooperation between the Faculty of Social and Political Science, especially graduate program in public administration. So we started working with Università della Svizzera Italiano last year. It is actually started when Parwiz Masamim, one of our students, got a scholarship to do research in ETH Zurich, and then he got the network with Patrick. And today we are happy to host our guest, Jan Patrick Villeneuve, and he's actually an associate professor of public administration and management at the UC. It is very difficult for me to say this, and started his career at that university in 2014. He is also the director of the Institute for Public Communication and head of the GRIP Public Integrity Research Group, and also co-director of the Master Program in Public Management and Public Policy. So in the future, we are hoping we will work closer with Patrick, especially because we just started to set up a double degree program between graduate program in public administration and public policy and management in UC. I think that he published, you can read later, his research interest and also publication, but most of them actually working on the issues of integrity and also open government, like the topic that we will discuss today. While we are waiting for the students, actually, I would like to give a brief information about UC. Probably Ibu Ari bisa tolong bantu. We will we will introduce the video, a short video on public policy and management. Ibu Ari bisa tolong? Bisa, Bu Ari. Okay, for those who, we already shared the virtual background for this seminar. You can find it in the chat. Bu Ari bisa nggak?
Sebentar, Bu.
Okay, ya. Yeah. See. Oke, kalau enggak saya coba. Wait a second, this is sorry for the technical problem. Okay, there it is. Yeah, we tried to make it quicker. Bu Ari, yeah, it is about 15 minutes ya. Bisa digedein itunya layarnya. Nggak ada suaranya, Bu Ari? Okay, because we couldn't hear the video. Patrick, probably you can help us to give a very quick, brief information about the program at your university.
Yes, thank you, Ida. Bon pomeriggio, good afternoon, bon après-midi to all the students. And thank you for my colleague, Ida, Eru, and of course, with the help, the ever useful Parviz, to allow me to speak to you guys this afternoon. So here, what you're seeing is a short video that the students did themselves. It was a student project to shoot a video on the program in public management and policy. It's a graduate program that we offer between the 3 linguistic regions of Switzerland, the French-speaking, the German-speaking, and the Italian-speaking region. So students spend 1 year covering the basics of public administration, I think mirroring a lot of the Okay, I think I was ejected from the call for a minute.
Yeah,
for a minute there. So I will pick up where I think I left. So this master's program between Lugano in Italian, Bern in German, and Lausanne in French, the students spend 1 year covering the basics, a bit of economics, a bit of management, a bit of public policy, a bit of law, to cover the fundamentals. And in the 3rd semester, So beginning of the second and last year, they can move. They can go to a different linguistic region of Switzerland. They can go to France, they can go to Italy, they can go to Germany to focus on a particular topic, be it more economics, more law, more public policy, or governance issues, so topics such as the ones we'll be covering this afternoon. The idea for us is to force students to explore public administration from also a different institutional and cultural point of view. Studying in Lugano in Italian is one thing. Going to Lausanne, doing in a different university, studying the same topics in French gives you a very different flavor to the material. And we think this is quite an important step to increase the diversity of perspective students have. So in a nutshell, this is the program, Public Management and Policy, that has been going on for, I think we're closing on 15 years of that. And it's a small program. In general, it's a small program compared to Indonesian institutions, very small program. We always have about 20 students, which means that the interaction with the professors are quite easy. That is, I cross my students in the cafeteria, we sit down for coffee and things like that. So it's a nice, small institution. And I know, Ida, you mentioned you wanted me to say a few words about the university itself. And I think Ida clearly mentioned we're developing these collaborations between Switzerland and Indonesia, particularly between our two universities and our expertise and interest in the topic of public administration. So USI, yes, it is a mouthful in English to say Università della Svizzera Italiana. I fully sympathize with Ida pronouncing this. University of Lugano works as well in terms of word. So it's a very small university. We have 3,000 students. We have a certain limited number of faculties. We have a faculty of informatics, of architecture, of biomedicine. We have the faculty where I'm in, which is communication. Of course, in a bigger as yours, I would be in a faculty. I'd be working with Ida in a faculty and in a department that focuses exclusively on public administration. We're a small institution, but we are and are quite research intensive. That is, I do spend quite a bit of time teaching, but we're doing a lot of research, which means having doctoral students, postdoctoral students, publishing books, article, and also working quite a bit on my end with public institutions, be it the Swiss institution, the European Union, other national governments, and on projects with the World Trade Organizations and many other international institutions based in Switzerland. Switzerland can be cold in the winter, which could be a disadvantage, but the proximity of international organizations and being located in the center of Europe does have its advantages. I don't know, Ida, if you wanted me to talk.
Okay. Yeah, I think, thank you very much, Patrick, for the introduction. I think we can start our discussion today. You will have your time. And for the participants, if you have question, you can put it in the chat room or later you can raise your hand and I will give you a chance to ask Patrick about his lecture. You can have your time, Patrick. Yeah. Yeah, you can start and share.
Excellent.
Your...
So, okay, écran partagé. Okay.
Dari Excel itu masuk ke trofi. Karena kan udah dijelasin caranya. Dari yang pas minggu kemarin juga pas mereka.
Okay, so do you guys see my
could you please make it bigger? Yeah, it is very small, the PowerPoint.
Okay. Is this better?
Yeah, okay, that's great. Okay.
Okay. All right. So thank you very much for being so numerous coming today to hear me talk a bit about open government reforms. And colleague Ida mentioned that many of you are also following a course on governmental reforms as a general topic. And of course, I'm teaching as well a class on governmental reform, notably in France. And I think it is quite important to look at ideas, policies, of course, on the one hand, but also the challenges and difficulties that are linked to their implementation in government. That's where we go from the world of policy discussion and quasi-philosophy to actual public administration. How do we make sure things we do have an impact and are integrated in government? So today I wanted to talk about open government as a process. Open government that is, yes, on the one hand, a buzzword, something we all talk a lot about. It's a topic that the United Nations talks quite a bit about through the Sustainable Development Goals, but also in very general terms. The United Nations pushing for more open approaches to government. The Open Government Partnership, as well as an international multi-stakeholder organization that focuses on this topic, the OGP, of which Indonesia is a member. Remember reading the official documents of the Indonesian government. Quite voluminous reports, I have to say. I think the two winners of all the reports I had to read were Indonesia and I think Chile or Argentina. You guys were at the top in terms of heaviness of proposal, but I'll get into this. So the topic is there, and I think to me it's important as a graduate student to reflect on what it means and what's behind the discourses. So the first thing, and this you have a nice iceberg, I think very few of them in Indonesia, with this idea that 90% of any iceberg is below the water. The metaphor here is that we see a bit what government does. We see what emerges out of the water. What we don't see is below the water. The functioning of government, its operations. A lot of it is invisible. The logic of open government, be it talking about concepts of transparency, talking about accountability, talking about civic participation, are all attempts at making visible this 90%. We want to see what is below the water. We are no longer happy with just seeing what's on the surface. Of course, and I've put bread here because I'm a big fan of good French bakeries. And I'm sure there's tons of Indonesian pastries that I've never tasted that I will be discovering through time and through this collaboration. But it's the idea that open government, transparency and accountability is like good bread. Good warm bread. Who is against it? Nobody. Everybody is in favor of this. It's a universal good. Nobody will come out and say, oh, I think this is not a good idea. No, of course it is. Of course it is. It is always a good concept. It's always presented as such, but it's also a political concept. You see here Barack Obama at the time promising that his administration would be the most transparent. This idea that using transparency, using open government is a useful political argument. This will get you votes. This will get you elected. And the Obama case was quite emblematic of this. If we go back a bit in time, Al Gore and Bill Clinton in the US as well were talking a lot about this. The Trump administration maybe a bit less. It's a euphemism, of course. But this was present in many countries. I haven't mentioned, but I'm originally from Canada. And so I do follow Canadian politics, and maybe the rather photogenic Prime Minister of Canada is somebody you've seen, at least in pictures, as well as a politician wanting to promise a more transparent government. Again, this idea that open government, transparency as a useful concept politically. Now, if we take the idea of transparency, what is this picture? This is the inside of a penitentiary in the United States. The model here represents the logic of transparency. It's called a panopticon. Maybe you can easily Google the panopticon concept. Is this idea that you can see everything. So you get the prison guards in the middle that can see every prisoner, every cell, all the way to the back of the cell because of the architecture. So here we have an architectural model that makes the whole operation transparent. It ensures that the prison guards can check, verify, and see everything. This is based on the idea of control, of course. They want to see to make sure prisoners are not doing something illegal. But beyond that, it means that if you're observed all the time, that you know that maybe the prison guard is watching me, you will behave differently. Maybe he's not watching, probably he's not watching, but maybe he is. And this, we hope, will change the behavior of the prisoners. Just like being watched might change the behavior of the administration. So you see sort of the fundamental logic in having this panopticon approach. And I find it interesting that the concept takes on a concrete brick and mortar physical form in terms of architecture. This is unfortunately the view many citizens might have of the government. A big, dark, imposing building where everything happens in the dark. It's, I think, a nice representation, but for the history, this is the University Library of Cambridge University. So a place of knowledge, of openness, but architecturally, you get this image of heaviness and secrecy, where we imagine meetings like this taking place. Men in dark rooms taking important decisions. So men in dark rooms taking important decisions. This is a photo taken for a famous movie, Dr. Strangelove, which is one of these classic movies of public administration, which I enjoin you to see. It's a very original movie, but it pushes on this idea that government makes decisions in secret. And for all the students, I cannot but encourage you to watch and to see movies, TV series related to public administration. There's a whole list of interesting elements. But this image gives you an idea of the representation we might have with the very particular relationship we have. The public wanting to know more. Hey, Mr. Government official, what's going on under there? I want to know more. And the government historically saying, trust me, you don't need to know. Trust me. Yes, but I'd like to, no, trust me. And you see, of course, at the bottom, laws and dollar bills. This idea that maybe the government is doing all kinds of things they should not be doing, illegal things. So, open government. Why would we want to see, to understand more what the government is actually doing? Why would we want to have more information, more participation? I mentioned when I started the United Nations and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. I think something you're probably all familiar with. So we get these 17 goals that aims at tackling poverty, healthcare, the environment, notably for SDG 13. And for each of these sustainable development goals, there's sub-targets and there's metrics, evaluating where we are, how we're progressing. In terms of open government, it's SDG 16 that is central to this discussion, where on the one hand, we want to lower the level of corruption and bribery in public administration, but we want also to develop open, transparent public institutions. And these things are seen as fundamental building blocks of a healthy society, fundamental building blocks to make possible all the other sustainable development goals. The idea is that if you want to reduce poverty, you cannot be very successful if you are not tackling issues of institutional openness and transparency and accountability. So all these 17 SDG goals are all tied in together, of course, with the one on environment, poverty, and this one, 16 on peace and justice, as central building block of the discussion. So we want institutions to be more open so that they're better governed. Think back to the prison. We think that by opening the doors, by making visible what is happening inside the organization, this will lead to better management. If everybody looks at what you're doing, maybe you will not reserve a room at the fanciest hotel when you go on a conference in London. Maybe you'll say, every accommodation. So on the one hand, it's to govern the state better that we're doing this. We want better accountability. We want the state to prove to us and to show us what they're doing, how they've done it. It is one thing to make a political promise, something else to enact a public policy, but then is that public policy effective? Is that working? Where has the money gone? Was it used properly? And finally, we want better democracy. In a democratic system, we need to know to control in terms of governance. But we also need information as citizens. In order to play our role as citizens, we need to know things. We need to know how the government works. We need to know how it operates. We need to have a voice. In order to have a voice, you need to know things. To know things mean two things. Education on the one hand, and you guys are all now getting a top-end education at that level, but it's also to have information. Because you could be MA graduates in public administration, but if the government tells you nothing, there's little you can actually do in democratic terms. So I'd say these are the three big objectives why we are pushing for more open government. The question then is, okay, as a concept, that's great. We open the door. We show what's inside the organization. We allow people to participate more in the process. It's all great, but how do we translate these public policies? These are some examples of innovations, of ways of doing things that would make generally governments more open. Budgeting. And in this particular case, I think the Brazilian case is absolutely fantastic. The Brazilian have, at national and local level, open budgets. You can follow the budget of public institutions online, and when they get to vote the national budget, there's a process for people to give their opinion. People can vote on where the money should go. Should we invest more in education? We do that. So budgets being more transparent. Where is the money going? Because in fine, in a democratic system, it's your money, what's being used. Opening political debates. It is the introduction in most parliaments of the world of cameras, live streaming debates at national level and even at very local level. Here in Switzerland, you can follow some of the municipal councils. Is it always super interesting? Absolutely not. We might talk about where the cows are going. Also, very, very local matter. But the discussion is being made transparently. You have active transparency. That is what governments would do, and I imagine the Asian government as well, communicating more and more with citizens, providing increasing amount of information. This means, yes, more reports. It also means websites. It might mean video, YouTube, press conferences. So the state gives citizens more and more and more information in all kinds of ways. It's a change in volume, a quantity, but it's also a change in nature of information. Just submitting a report is one thing. Having a press conference on YouTube and taking questions from the public at large changes the whole communication structure. You get a direct input from citizens. It's not just the giving a report. So a lot of active transparency. This is important. There has been an important change, what we call passive transparency. The development starting, I would say, more importantly in the early 1990s of access to information legislations. This idea that the state must give information to citizens, not can give information. It's not just that the state can decide what to communicate, but that a lot of information the state must give to citizens when they ask. So it's the importance of having laws that are framing the access to information by citizens. This aspect has completely changed the logic of administrations in terms of open government. Traditional governments, and even today, quite a reality, this logic of secrecy, of administrative privilege, of institution. Access to information has reversed a fundamental cultural aspect of public administration. It used to be that everything was secret, and then the government decides what it wants to communicate. But the government itself decides. Now we're in a system where few exceptions. That is, within the law, you will have, of course, will not communicate on military strategic aspects. The United States, that has a very extensive access to information legislation, you cannot get the name of CIA operatives around the world. Of course not. But the number of elements that will be secret. But you see, we flipped the relationship completely from all secret with a few exceptions to all open with a few exceptions. But another example would be processes of civic participation. Historically, the state would just develop a policy, maybe consult the experts, and that was it. Today, we expect the state for any new development, be it a new bus line, a new subway, a new school, to actively seek out the voices of the citizens, of local association, of different organizations, maybe of religious leaders and other actors. It is the importance of the input of stakeholders in any political process. So we're now at a period where the government making unilateral decision is increasingly seen as illegitimate. You need to consult. You need to give a voice to citizens. Some have labeled that in many cases as social license. You need to get the quote unquote symbolic permission of the locals to implement something. If I take an example in Canada, for example, when we want to develop natural resources, often it's on the land of an Aboriginal community. Legally, in many cases, the central government could decide just to come in and do things. This is no longer acceptable, of course. You need to discuss with people on the ground. They need to be partners in this. And we believe by generating these types of partnership, by increasing civic participation, democracy is the winner. But I was talking about TV series. If you have a chance, I think it's available on YouTube. It's the BBC series Yes Minister. That is a fantastic example of the British Westminster system at play. It's a comedy where you follow a being expertly and very professionally managed by the administration. So the minister in every episode has a great idea, and the administration tells him always, yes, minister, but. And generally the administration ends up making the decision for him, and his idea is not implemented at all. It's the power. It's an interesting example of the power of the administration. But in the very first episode, it's something I show my students, there's a famous quote on open government, because the minister gets elected and he wants to open government. Now he wants to be more transparent. And the cabinet secretary, which is the highest civil servant, the top public administration civil servant, above him is politicians, is the prime minister. And he says, my dear boy, it's a contradiction in terms. You can be open or you can have government. This happen, maybe you won't be able to do anything. You won't be able to have a government. This idea that secrecy is essential on the workings of the government. That's probably something that is shared by a number of elected officials. That is looking at this whole process of transparency, of accountability, of open government with, yes, a positive eye, with a positive words and declaration, but that in reality, this is generating a lot of problems within the administration. And that is the difference, I think, for you that are studying public administration, to go into this. What does that mean for the administration? So not just for political discourse. So you can do the political, philosophical analysis of the concept, but you also need to look at what does that mean in administration for governments. So this transparency within the institution is, of course, meant a number of things. That is, processes for the administration to be more transparent, but also has led to a number of leaks. That is, people that have taken a lot of information from the government and put them out there. Julian Assange being an example for WikiLeaks, or Edward Snowden, an external consultant that outed the fact that the United States government was spying on its own citizens. Quite problematic, but very transparent. But that generates a number of issues, of course. In the case of Snowden, the American government saying generating problems of national security. And in the case of Julian Assange, given the amount of information that he leaked, and as well, including things that look innocuous, small things such as a US diplomat saying that diplomat of this other country is not the brightest person in the room, or that maybe we have lied a bit, etc. This transparency of message in these two cases, whether you agree or not with what they did, I think this is a separate discussion, but it's this idea that putting information on the table has consequences, always positive. So it could be argued that for society, it is a positive. It's always a positive step. For administration, of course, this generates all kinds of difficulties, challenges, and problems. So we have the administration enacting policies. We have leaks from externals in these two cases. You also have, of course, people in administrations that would leak information. Maybe you're a civil servant and you see something problematic, maybe you make a photocopy and you send it to the press. It's an age-old tradition in many countries. Journalists with very good sources getting to the problematic aspects of the government. The idea of having a transparent and open process is that these things would not happen. That is, because you can't hide anything, you will refrain from giving a bribe. You would refrain from favoring your friends in a public tender bid. I've had this image because I think to me that represents, yes, on the one hand, one Swiss tradition, but also the open historical democracy. Okay, this is the small canton of Appenzell, smallest of the cantons, with 20 smallest one. There's only 15,000 people. At semi-regular interval, decisions at the cantonal level are made. The small people with a right to vote gather in the village place and raise their hands for votes. Normally, it seems like the old Athenian ideal of democracy. You get every citizen's on the village place. So ultimate openness, participation in that sense. We have these things, and I mentioned, we've talked already about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal. That's one aspect. There's the Open Government Partnership that pushes for more open government. I mentioned Indonesia participating in this OGP. If I take the case of Indonesia, the government putting in place a participatory process to identify with civil society, with stakeholders, what are the elements where Indonesia should be better in terms of open government proposals, putting them in a report, submitting that to the international organization, having those validated and evaluated, and then the government being pushed to enact these promises, these commitments. And every 2 years, government, Indonesia, Brazil, Chile, close to 80 governments in the world generating a virtuous circle of promises for more open government. So we get international organizations, but we also have more specific events, International Day of Universal Access to Information. This is funded by EU, but this idea that in the EU, we should have clear EU laws accessible, EU tenders. The European Union's huge institutions, every day they need people to work. They need to issue contracts. That goes from an academic analysis to restoring the bathrooms in their offices in Poland. Access to information. So we've seen the ability, better governance and management, better democratic process. But of course, for a public institution, this can generate problems. This can mean problems that might be very minor, gets exposed in the press as if they were major scandals. It means you will be losing control of the conversation. Because once the information is either in the press or in the hands of your political opponents, the situation becomes a bit more difficult. So we've identified there's a number of publications on this. What are organizations? We've outlined a number of reasons why you'd want to be transparent, how they're doing it, but there's also strategies to avoid it. Making sure that you're not part of any initiative. So very bureaucratic approach. If you have problematic documents, why not destroy them? We've seen that as well. Tons of promises on open government, but no budget. Yes, we'll do A, B, C, D. We are very ambitious. What is the budget? 0. So not terribly ambitious and block. You just wait. So for example, when a journalist asks for information, you could decide to take your time, because maybe in 6 months, this scandal will no longer be of importance. This scandal will no longer be the front page of the news. So we've seen in many governments in the world, and to be honest, quite a bit in the top ranked countries, the Netherlands, Canada, Switzerland, a bit. So countries that are known for having good open systems, we see emerging strategies. We also see a number of consequences. We've opened governments in many countries, but people still distrust government, even if government is more open. Because one of the objectives is, of course, we'll show you what we do, and then you'll trust us more. Trust being at the basis of a functioning democratic system. Of course, one could say that being more open shows everybody how bad sometimes a government can be. Would you trust a government that generates a scandal a week? Maybe not. We have issues of cost, and you'll probably cover in all the other types of reform you do. Doing an open government reform costs a lot of money. You need to have a top-end document retrieval system. Find it. If I want to have more participation by citizens, I need to hire people that are able to manage popular assemblies. So very good for technical aspect, but for civic participation, maybe you need a public administration expert, somebody like you guys. Question of privacy, open, what should not be open? Should I know exactly all what he does should remain? In some topics, the Americans say, yes, this needs to be transparent. This is private life. And I think this aspect of cultural difference is really important in these things. We're not talking about reforms that are purely administrative and structure, but also an historical. And I think that's quite important. And it is notably important because a lot of reforms have a tendency to come from Anglo-Saxon countries that have had historically tendency to undervalue the role and importance of cultural differences to make sure that these policies work. So to wrap up, I think we used to be in a situation like this in terms of open government. That is, the government would give us a few drops of water. It's great if you're the government. If you're a director, like many of you will be in a few years of a public administration, you're controlling the faucet. You're controlling the amount of information, the type of information that goes out. you're in total control, which means if there's a problem, you're safe. Society is not, but we'll see. This is the situation now. So now the idea is we'll give you information. We'll give you a lot of information, tons of information. So as an administration, you no longer control so many things. So it's problematic for the administration. But put yourself in the shoes of the citizen. Can you manage that much water? Can you manage, as a citizen, all this information, all these platforms? This becomes challenging. So in many cases, we've been in a situation where the government has agreed to give information, has agreed to be more open, but then has flooded the citizen, which means the citizen doesn't really know more.
Please feel free to write your comment and question based on topic here. Silahkan.
Right. So thank you very much. That was a rapid overview of some of the reforms, and I think it's important to underline a few key aspects. One, it has costs. It also leads to deviant strategies. That is, organization not really wanting to do this. And we are now in a situation where we need to better manage the results of these reforms. And this is true, I think, for Indonesia. It's true for all countries that are operating within these objectives. So, merci beaucoup, grazie. Thank you very much for your for having listened to all of this. Thanks. I give you back the floor, Ida.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Well, we have learned about what is actually happening about the open government. I think we will have some time, about 30 minutes for discussion. Do you have any question? You can raise your hand. Any question from the students or other participants? Okay. Okay, I think this is from Pak Tri. Okay, the question from Pak Tri asking about the open government is not the final outcome because the ultimate goal of the government is better public services. How to make sure that open government will increase the quality of public service, because all of the government reports are good, not bad thing. Okay, can you get the question?
Okay, no, sorry, my system has gone into a...
Okay.
Oh, it works anyway. Yes, this is a very good question. And so a first answer would be that you are right to point to the need for this to have an impact. Too often now, we have discussions on open government that are at the philosophical level. Why do we do open government? Because open government is good. Because transparency and openness is fundamentally a good process. Because it's good for democracy, because it's good in and of itself. The question you ask, and clearly from a public administration viewpoint, is, okay, why are we investing these resources and taking this time to go into that direction? How do we make sure this serves a purpose? And I think it does in... So I've lost you. I think it brings additional elements to the discussion and to the delivery of public services. On the one hand, it allows public institutions to get more input from citizens. How are your services and policies tailored to their actual needs? What do citizens want? Maybe you're in the capital, you think, oh, this is a great idea, let's do this. But maybe at local level, they say, If we had to choose, we would have opted for something different. So at the operational level, I think getting input is quite important. A second important aspect is that by showing citizens what you're doing as an organization, you will get them to more willingly use services and participate in the process. I said that the level of trust in institutions in general has not increased. It's true. Where we saw an increase in trust is at the more local level. That is, maybe I won't trust the national government more. Oh, but my local administrators, yes, they're great. They're really great. We now have the website and we see everything, and I think they're doing a great job. So I think at the lower end, but when we talk about street level bureaucracy, the interactions we have with local civil servants in our daily interaction, these have increased quite a bit. So I think it's towards these types of elements that we should focus, and they've shown to be very useful in that direction.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope that answered the question, Pak Tri.
Can I add one more question, please, to continue the first question?
Okay, but a very quick one, because we have another question from Rio.
Yes.
Okay, Patrick, please.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Patrick. I have one study about the information society. So, based on your explanation, the effectivity of open government should be respond effectively by information community, so they give feedback to get a better to give the feedback for the government to improve their quality of the service. That's why the other side, the variable that influence the effectivity of open government is also information society. So what do you think about the information society, maybe in general? Thank you.
I think information society, even if you are against it, if you think there's too much information, there's too much everything, it is there. Okay, it is a given. YouTube is not going anywhere. This is a reality that public institution needs to deal with, but it is also an increasing and very clear expectation on the part of citizens. People would not be happy with government communicating less. People would find it very bizarre that the government just has a report in paper form, and then you can read it by going to the governmental office. We expect them on a website. We expect the government to be active and to reach out to us. When they don't, we increasingly distrust them. We ask questions. In democratic context, we vote them out of office. So to answer to your question, I think this is a given. We can have a discussion on the benefits and disadvantages of the information society. But I think at the administrative level, it's a given, and you need to find a good strategy to manage that.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Patrick. Now we have Rio. He's our graduate, but he's not actually very close to you. He's in Ljubljana University doing his doctorate degree. Rio, you can have your time.
Oh, wow.
Ya, terima kasih Bu Ida. Thank you. Grazie. Also buongiorno to you, Patrick. We are here still in the morning. Yeah, I'm really glad that I have this meeting today with my faculty. One of my biggest concern now is how we are really understand the nature of the concept itself. So when we talk about open government, also we must understand the transparency as in the core of its concept. But in the way that now we are looking into the how European countries, also how Indonesia cope with the concept of open government is quite different. You know, we are talking a lot about this topic in here in Europe, but in Indonesia, it's depend on the political will. So I know that in 2011, when President Yudhoyono became member of Open Government Partnership, it's because of the relation between US and Indonesia. It's really nice, you know, at that time. But now we are a little bit backward on the open government. We now maybe more embrace the digital transparency or more digital transformation, but as a concept, open government is not developed that well in developing countries like Indonesia. So because it's consists transparency and the other concept also overshadowing the open government. So how your perspective on this point? Thank you.
Yes, you raise quite a good point. Of course, when the Open Government Partnership started, you get, very mediatic Barack Obama that is doing this, and every politician in the world wants to be close to Barack Obama because he's so popular. He's known around the world, so everybody was on it. Yes, for the concept, but also, to rub shoulders with Barack Obama. With time, it is true, and it's not only Indonesia. Many countries are doing maybe less today because it's less, because Obama is gone on the one hand, and the process is a bit older, and then we focus on different things. We focus on digitalization, as you rightly pointed to. In terms of, it could be digitization of one of the debates in Europe is having all the medical dossiers of everyone on the cloud, to digitalize this so you get access to your information and it's more open, but still you're protected. It's also a lot about open data. So it's not just the ability to get a report from the government. It's to have access to the analysis, but also to the Excel file. So it's not the report on this river is polluted. It's not the internal note by the scientists saying, based on the data, we found that. No, it's to get the data. On Monday morning at 9 o'clock, we took 1 liter of water at that point, at that point, at that point. These are the results, allowing you to redo the analysis.
Yes.
Who does that? Who uses this open data is, of course, sort of an open question. But you're right that pointing out that we're doing towards digitization on the one hand, and on the other, that doing these things are this open government isn't. The government of Canada has tons of problem being transparent, despite the laws, despite the media, despite all that, despite the resources that they have, because they're trying to hide this and that. There might be a bit of scandal, it's politically problematic. If you transpose these difficulties in a country like Canada or the Netherlands to a developing context, of course, it is a super challenge. It is incredibly difficult. The flip side being that if you do get onto that train, I think the benefits can also be better, because there's we call lowers too much, and that would benefit greatly. This is political will. If they're not willing to push for it and to fund it, nothing will happen. So it will remain of the president or prime minister of a country going to Washington, having a nice cocktail, staying in a nice hotel, saying open government is great, and then flying back business class and doing nothing, which unfortunately is a reality a bit of a lot of forums, but that's.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you very much, Patrick. And now we move back to the questions from the chat room. There is a question from Ati, one of our doctorate students. She's asking about the contradictory reality between privacy and transparency. when we are talking about privacy, about the personal data, it is very risky because some of the regulation actually allow us to register some personal data online, and the risk is very huge for those who put the data online. So what do you think about this?
I think there's two aspects. There are the data of individual citizens that should be protected through legal and technological means, which means heavy investments. Whether you do them or not is a different question. The discussion now, at least in Europe and North America, we're much more on the privacy discussion than on the transparency discussion. These things are quite sensitive. But if you go and look at the leaks, the amount of information that were stolen from private companies and from government is quite high. So yes, there is a worry to be had there, notably when we start touching elements that could have a direct impact, for example, health elements that maybe if they're public would limit your ability to get insurance, for example. So there's practical problems, there's fundamental philosophical issues to that. So that's for the average citizen, and how much do we engage in online services? So we need governments to be, I think, a bit more serious about this. But there's also the question of politicians. Where do we draw the line? Should we know how much it costs for the hotel room of the minister when he went to the UN conference in New York, or not? Should we know what investments our politicians have on the stock market, or not? And I think these aspects are relatively cultural up to a certain extent. There's a famous case of François Mitterrand that had a second family, right? The press knew about it, but it was not discussed openly, and it was fine. It was his private life. A situation that would have been unthinkable in the United States. Unthinkable. Because then we're really in matters of very private aspects that are valued differently depending on the societies. At the level of expenses, yes, I think I should know, but that's my cultural, my approach. Yes, I should know what a politician is doing. Is he on a board of a company as well as being an elected official? How is this having an impact on the decision he's taking? How is this having an impact on the decision to give a huge infrastructure contract to this company versus that company? I think I should know. Surprisingly enough, in many countries, including if I take the Canadian Senate, okay, the upper house of Canada, many senators have second jobs, even though they're very, very well paid as senators. Yes, I do believe it's problematic. But again, you see a case like this in Canada, I can imagine the difficulty and challenges of doing this in other contexts. Of course, Canadian senators are absolutely not interested of having rules that says you're no longer able to be in business, you're no longer able to be a lawyer, you're no longer able to do this and that to make more money. They won't vote against their own best interest, thus raising the challenge even more. But the privacy issue is, you rightly point to, one of the big debates. Where is the line? And how porous is that line between the two?
Okay, great. Thank you. It's very interesting point of view on the question of issue of transparency and privacy. And now we have another question from another student, Irna. She's doing her doctorate degree at Public Administration Department. And her question is actually asking about Indonesian situation, Indonesian position in terms of open government. Open government is based on principles of transparency, integrity, accountability, and stakeholder participation. And those principles are in fact similar to the good governance principles. According to the OG Index, Indonesia is now in the position of rank 32 out of 102 countries surveyed. So this can be said that Indonesia is in a relatively good position. We are open on information and inclusiveness. So, but actually Indonesia need to improve the rank to be much more better in terms of open governance index. So what is your suggestion? What actually Indonesia can do to enhance the effort in open government index?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Irna, for the question.
Good question. So there's two elements here, and I think they should be necessarily distinguished. So yes, Indonesia is looks quite good in all these rankings. Is playing the game, is present in international forums. Showing up is also an important metric. You need to make a difference between these rankings that evaluate very specific elements. To tie that into something you guys might know more, we evaluate and rank universities. But depending on the metrics, you can be ranked super high or super low. Do you rank the number of articles published by professor, or do you rank the satisfaction of students? Do you rank the quality of food in the cafeteria? Is that a big element, or nobody cares? So for all these rankings, depending on the specific methodology of the ranking, you get very, very different elements. For example, there is an international ranking of access good is the law. And based on this, you get a lot of, I think it was the last case, Tajikistan had a better law than Germany. Do we think that Tajikistan is more transparent than Germany? Maybe not. I mean, I don't know the details, but this, just to give you an idea that the rankings don't always reflect reality. As a government, you need to take into account these rankings, and you need to play the game. Again, a university that sees that the quality of food is super important in the ranking might decide to invest in a new chef in the cafeteria and not give more money for students. So there's a bit of strategy. The flip side is the actual state of affairs, reality on the ground. And I think for this, you do need more research, more analysis. And I think it's in that direction of providing resources on the one hand, and not being afraid to do tests, experiments. Take one city and offer the mayor of the city to come in and to do with it. I think it'd be fantastic to have, you know, a group of students that integrate more participatory process at local level for 6 months, for a year, and see how that goes. And I think experimentation to find what works in a given environment, and that's different things and different realities. One size fits all internationally, no, even nationally. I'm originally from Canada. There's a part that speaks French, there's a part that speaks English. The evaluation of this is different in these two sections. So this would be my tidbit, without knowing more, because of course you guys know a lot more of the administrative system in Indonesia. But I think these would be interesting ideas to explore.
Okay, thank you very much. Ibu Irna, what do you think? Do you still have some questions for Patrick?
It's enough. Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Patrick, for your explanation. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. We still have about 10 minutes. If anybody want to ask some question before we conclude this session. Okay, I think that we have 100 students here with us. Thank you very much for staying with us, even though it is actually a bit late in Indonesia. This topic, open government reform, is quite popular now amongst our students. So more and more students actually doing research related to open government reform and other related issues. And not many of them actually straightforward discuss about the relation between open government reform with the corruption. Probably only 1 or 2 students doing that, but most of the students now interested in interpreting open government reform with the digitalization and also the process of bureaucratic reform. So we heard that Patrick shared the ideas of open government actually highly related to global agenda on sustainable development goals. And what we see today is actually not the reality in the actual fact, because with the iceberg phenomenon, there are so much more gray area in terms of open government. Civic participation in Indonesia, for example, also not really something solid. There's still so many problems related to the civic participation as well as the issues of transparency. But I think that it is interesting to see how actually global development agenda, including Indonesian development agenda, relate to the bureaucratic reform and open government reform. Indeed, as mentioned by Irna, that where Indonesia is relatively good in terms of the rank, but of course, indicators are very relative. We don't really, I mean that we might not be able to measure the real performance of the open government indicators in some countries, including in Indonesia. And we got also at least 4 questions from a student, from 3 doctorate student and Rio's. I don't know, Rio, probably you will have some chance to visit UC in the future because you are very close compared to us.
Of course, I will. I'll try. Yeah.
And Ati and Irna. So thank you very much for the participation. And for those students who's taking who's enrolled in my class, in the bureaucratic reform class, please don't forget to make a short response for this lecture. We will also post this record of the lecture in our website, yeah, Live Unpad. So you can put your response online later on. Probably you need to digest some of the information. But thank you very much again, Patrick, for your time. I know it is very early in your country, but we are very happy to have you and sharing your ideas on open government reform. And Pak Heru, I think that's all we can have today. But before we close, Pak Heru, would you like to share and giving a very this is actually Indonesian style of appreciation. We have a certificate signed by the dean. If not Pak Heru, probably Parvis, you can share the certificate and Pak Heru will give the certificate.
I think I have it, but I didn't, so I will try it.
Okay, so hang on a second. Okay.
Just 1 minute, sorry.
Okay, I can. Oh, I think I can have it. And I don't know.
Oh yeah. Okay. Okay, hilang lagi.
Okay, just.
Can you? Will you share it, Paris?
I think it's visible right now.
Okay.
Okay. Is it visible?
Yes, we can see that.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ibu Ida, Ibu, actually, Pak Heru, and just I want to thank our colleagues at FISIP, Ibu Savitri and Ibu Ari, and everyone just who helped us to organize this webinar. And also thank you so much, Professor Patrick, for your great presentation and lecture. Really enjoyed that one because I was really interested in the active and passive transparency, because before I did a research about open government regarding to Afghanistan, but I did not come across to this one. So of course I will study more. So is it visible, Esther, or no? The screen.
Yeah, it's visible. Peru, you can hand it over this certificate officially.
Okay, with Patrick, I think thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. So as we token our gratitude, we provide a certificate for you. Please accept it, Mr. Patrick.
You have to get used to Indonesian tradition that we love to just handing over certificate of appreciation. Thank you very much, Patrick. Yeah. I think before we close, probably you have some closing statement for the participant, Patrick.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. Certificate of appreciation. I think it's a nice tradition. It's a really nice tradition. Questions for all of this. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to all of you guys on this topic. And as a closing word, I think the development of the open government conversation in public administration is not in its initial step, but will keep going for several more years. I think there's a lot of aspects in there that still require a lot more scholarship. All this to say, topics for MA thesis and PhD thesis, there is quite a few there, and I'm quite happy to see that you guys are in good hands to explore these topics with my colleague here in Indonesia. And those of you that have questions and interrogation, do not hesitate to send me a small email. It's always a pleasure to receive this, and I'll get back to you on the various questions you might have. Good luck for the rest of your studies. And thank you again, Ida, Eru, and Parviz for the invitation. That was really nice.
Okay, thank you very much. And for your attention and your time. And now before we close the session, allow me to share another activities. I hope you can read that. Anyone can see the new flyer? Parviz, could you please to close yours?
Sure. I think it's already closed.
Okay, but I couldn't see my, hang on a second. Sorry. So actually we have Pak Ahmad Buhori. Kang Buho, you can share the information about next week event. So we will continue to have another international webinar series. We will have Professor Alan Rosenboom next week. Yeah. So you're more than welcome to participate. Kang Buho, are you there? Okay. I think he's probably in other activities. Anyone, can you read my
Bisa, Wida, udah jelas.
Ada ya, kelihatan.
Layarnya udah jelas ya.
Okay, saya ngebagi ini. Okay, so next week we will host Professor Alan Rosenboom. He is the president of the American Society for Public Administration. He's also the founding director of the Center for Democracy and Good Governance at Florida International University, Miami, USA. So he will talk about inequality, public administration, and the fight for democratic value. I think this is quite interesting and also related to Patrick lecture today. And Patrick, also your students also more than welcome if they have time to join us. It is quite nice of Professor Alan. He will give the lecture at night from the Miami, and we will have our morning Monday. Okay. Thank you again for all the participants, and I think we also have some my manager of collaboration also here. So hopefully in the future we can discuss more of these issues, because what we're talking today is very important for the student, and I know some undergrad students haven't got any topics for the research, and probably open government topic will give you some insight on how you can conduct so many aspects of the open government for your undergrad research. Thank you very much again, Patrick, and have a good day. You still have a long day over there, and we are approaching to our night here. Thank you. Rio, terima kasih. Thank you very much. Nanti minggu depan datang lagi ya. Mudah-mudahan waktunya pas.
Amin, amin, insyaallah, Ibu. Makasih banyak, Ibu. Ya, thank you very much.
Patrick.
Goodbye, everyone. Ciao, ciao.
Ya, ciao, ciao.
Terima kasih, Bu. Atur nuhun.
Atur nuhun,
I
Ibu.
forgot that we haven't take the photo ya of us. I think the student, how many? Bu Ari bisa bantu nggak foto?
Oh ya.
Patrick, you hold on for a while. I forgot that we haven't take the photo. Some of the students already left. We used to have 123. Could you please to open your camera? Because if you have a very quick picture for okay, Ibu Ari, can you help? Dibantu Bu Ari di foto dulu, or probably one of my students.
Iya.
Oh ya, Bu Ari bisa. Oke. Okay.
Slide pertama ya, Bu.
Ya.
1, 2, 3.
I lost Patrick already. Iya. Oke. Okay. Setelah itu, ini ada Pak Harlan.
Slide kedua.
Oke. Okay. Saya nggak tahu di slide berapa, jadi senyum we.
Slide ketiga.
Ada buka prodi nih, ada Bu Nina. Terakhir ya, sudah?
Sudah.
Oke, terima kasih semuanya ya. Jangan lupa minggu depan kita ketemu Profesor Ellen dari Florida International University. Terima kasih semuanya. Hatur nuhun Pak Agus, ini rajin-rajin di mahasiswa Banten. Hatur nuhun Bu Nina, Bu Erna.
Sami, hatur nuhun.
Sampai bertemu kembali. Nuhun ya.